thrown out your table. I know I personally have struggled with feeling like in certain spaces I'm allowed to be a person of color, but in certain spaces I'm only allowed to be queer, and me being a person of color isn't accepted in those spaces. And finding the way to finding groups that accept you as a full person and not just one identity or another identity. And I know some of the folks up here, you all have dealt with race in different ways. I know, Victor, you mentioned Alejandra as one of your characters who dealt with race and queerness.
It can be, there's less than savory games that I've gotten to play in where it felt like, pardon the expression of queerness, a minority Olympics of like, oh, well, I'm more of a minority than you. I know what oppression feels like. It's just like, buddy, it's not additive, it's exponential. Like, you add stuff up and it's just like, oh, you're disabled. Oh, you're queer. Oh, you're also a person of color. Like, it's stuff that, like, being at the table lets you not only get away from that, but also explore that in a way that, like, when you're doing a queer narrative, it's, for some people, it's never just a queer narrative. It's also like, what if I was stronger? What if I didn't have to deal with this pain in my elbow every freaking day and expect people for me to be like, yeah, I'm a funny guy all the time. I don't have any other angry, upset feelings that are like too big, And it feels like you can't be all that big sometimes. It's like you gotta fit in this spot and we'll let you talk about this stuff that affects this thing. But if we talk about what's outside the box, that's outside my experience, don't really want to hear about it. Let's move on, folks. Yeah. It's a little rough, but like that's the cool thing about, and like bringing it back to the table, is that when you're building a story together, and when you're inhabiting these characters, so you sometimes you forget about the boxes that you're in, and you're more willing to explore with people that just like, oh, this thing doesn't usually affect me. But you know what? It's affecting you, and I'm in this character, and I'm going to look at this thing, that I'm sitting across the table from you, and I am experiencing this together with you. And even if you're not queer, you can feel that. You can feel that romance, that desperation, all the things that are involved in queerness that aren't just tragedy or joy. It's a whole spectrum of emotions and existence, and it's fantastic.
Once a week I get to
But yes, queerness is an intersection, and not just a white marriage.
Yes.
Yes, feel the art. Especially if you Latinx, and then the community itself, you have Latin neighbors and Latinx, and you have the discourse there, and everybody we have the discussions, but it seems like we're having a discussion and we're talking about that, where we use like in these words, like you call pre-names every because it's super like validating. I guess I'm putting myself into the language, then you're like X, and it's like it doesn't really fit the language itself, but I think we're trying to use it.
Yeah, academic linguistics versus like real linguistics.
Once a week, mentioning what you were talking about playing a romance and everything, I get to romance my DM, who is my best friend from college and is completely straight. I get to look him in the eyes and say romantic things to him. But talking about all of this, as a GM or a player, how do you build up your narrative and your story? How do you put those into your characters, into the world building, into everything? Like, how do you make a queer story? Because a lot of the media only shows us a few types of queer stories. Coming out, homophobia, furrier gays, and AIDS. Those are like the only stories we get within the media.
That's something that I just love about tabletop gaming in general, because you can tell the stories that you don't see out there, and you can experience them with people you love, and you can explore your identity and whatnot, and it's just a really freeing method of delivering narratives that you don't get to see. And for me personally, like, my characters are queer because I am queer. Like, I'm never gonna play a straight cis character ever because that just isn't interesting to me. We get enough of that. So, all my characters are queer, and at least for me, just my existence and my character's existence makes it a queer narrative because that's just who they are. And for me personally, when I write my characters, I like having them be queer, but then they also do something else. Like, they're not just the gay one. Like, they get to be, you know, good at their job. They get to be other things besides just the identity and labels that people are like, oh, you're bi, or you're trans, and, you know, like, they get to be a fully fleshed out person. And then going back to intersectionality, I get to explore other parts of my identity that I don't really, like, talk about as much. Like, I'm adopted, and so I feel a very big disconnect between like who I am being raised here and the little tiny island off the coast of southern China where I was born. Like, it's a lot of my characters have that sort of disconnect in their stories, and I get to explore that in addition to queerness, in addition to everything else. Like, I just feel like I pour all of me into my characters all the time, and that in and of itself, because I am queer, makes it queer.
You know, kind of in this respect, you know, look at it as well, like, I'm a queer person, my views are being queer, and that's just how it's gonna be, like, you know, that's it. So, like, whenever I do design for, like, web games, like, I'm automatically put, like, you know, same-sex couple, non-binary people in, because that's the world I live in, at least that's the people I surround myself with, therefore they're gonna be my games and they're fucking as much, so, it just happens.
I like when building a queer story in a playable game especially, but in any story, instead of just relying on literally putting queer people in a situation that is a queer experience and then taking them through the story that we've heard 100 times about, like Rake said, coming out or being met with homophobia or whatever. If you boil these things down, it is about being a person who feels somewhat disconnected from the world that you're in and your journey into finding how you fit and how to make the world around you fit you. And I feel like there are ways to tell that story without telling it too. I am so sorry, I'm a broken record, but werewolves are a really good avenue for that. And then even more common probably is just the existence of a found family story is a way to tell a queer narrative without necessarily making people's gender or sexual identities the focus of the story, because that journey is the journey that we are on. And that's about it.
Found family is great. Love it. The best.
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is literally what Arcade just did when they were introducing questions and naming a lot of the stuff that is a problem that we see in the media. Arcade and I were watching Riverdale, which...
Why would you do that?
I have thoughts.
So we were watching Riverdale, and we're watching it because we hate ourselves, it's fine. But we're looking at the character Kevin, who is the gay character on the show. And that is their entire story, is he's gay. That's it. That's his whole personality, that's every scene that he has, everything that he has to do has to do with being gay. That's all the development that he gets, is being gay.
His whole character is not only that he's gay, but there's not anyone else for him to bang in town. That's the entire character. And it's wild.
And the CW said, look at this, Kevin did. This is representation. This is queer representation. Don't be like the CW. 100%. I can go off on rants about the CW forever and have enough time, but I think a big part of when we're making these stories with queer characters, I play tragic characters all the time, as literally anyone at this table. Most of my characters have a tragic backstory. None of those tragic backstories have to do with being queer. My characters are inherently queer, they're gay, they're non-binary, they're poly, all of these things, but the struggles that my characters have to deal with don't have to deal with society not accepting them for being queer, or being shunned because they have AIDS and all this other stuff. They just exist as a queer person in the real life issues that all of us deal with. And I think there is a balance between, there are stories that are important to hear about AIDS, that are important to hear about not being accepted for who you are, and all that stuff. But when that is the majority of the media versus the rest of us just are existing and just like living our lives and like have the same problems that a lot of straight cis people do, and that's just not portrayed a lot in media, and then tabletop RPG sometimes, that's when it becomes a problem. So I think the big part of making games and running games and playing games is making sure that like your queer people are people. Like it's not, we are awesome. I will say like 100% 10 toes down. We're amazing, but we don't have like, we're not different in that aspect. We don't have like a special subset of problems that's like, these are all the problems that we deal with, nothing else. We have a lot of overlap with straight people. We have a lot of overlap with cis people. And I think recognizing that is a big thing.
I think that a big thing is, and I was terminally on Tumblr when Tumblr was big. And there's this description that I was searching for this panel, I couldn't remember. It's just that, everyone likes the table narrative, right? Everyone likes the table narrative. Oh, well, we have seats for you at the table. But the thing is, growing up queer, it always felt like we had a different menu. Where it's just like, oh, if you're this, you've got your desserts, man, you've got chocolate cake, you've got milkshakes, everything, and then the queer person's got like, oh, I've got this like weird, what's something controversial? I got this weird tapioca pudding, and then suddenly, oh, well, now you have access to our menu. It's just like, oh man, chocolate cake? It's like, oh, well, why are you excited for chocolate cake? Why are you excited for these narratives that we've had forever, now that they're queer? It's like, well,
Exactly.
we didn't have chocolate cake on our menu.
I would flip my lip for a gay Hallmark Christmas.
Please.
There's
Even
one
though
on Netflix.
have you seen
There's
it?
one on Netflix right now. Single all the way.
Single all the way.
That's incredible.
There is no homophobia in it. And Jennifer Coolidge is in it. Not sponsored.
Thank you.
Give us the cheese. Like if anyone out here is making movies, I don't know, but like give us the cheese. I want cheesy shit. I want the shit that the straight people get. Like, give me that, but make it trans, queer, and with people of color, please.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing, like, I want, not all narratives have to be happy. And not all, and that's the big thing of, like, I feel like I get a lot of pushback, well, not every story has to be happy. Yeah, but not every story has to be rooted in pain and misery. There are ways to tell a triumphant, celebratory story. Something that celebrates an identity, a person, an action, without it having to be like, oh, happy ending, oh, everyone survives. Like, yeah, I go nuts for those stories. I'm so tired of sad shit. But like, also, people need sad stuff. People need that lump, that sort of like feeling of like, everything is terrible, but there's like this hope that I'm gonna get pulled out of this place. And, queer narratives, like, don't do that in the past. It's like, no, you die. That's it. It's just like, let's reimagine that. Let's push forward what we can do with this old menu.
And like a lot of that has to do with the history of how America and media works. The Hays Code started in 1938 and lasted until the 1960s, and it was an informal code of rules for Hollywood on how they could portray things in movies. And it lived in things from violence, sexuality, and what they called sexual perversion, which is queerness, which is where queer coding comes from. Because creators wanted to make queer content, so they made things that were subtly queer, like Dracula's Daughter, and other sort of movies that had these queer notes. But a straight member of the audience would see it and be like, oh, cool, great movie. Well, all the gays are like, gay!
They're just roommates.
And they were roommates.
They're just gal pals.
It's just alcohol.
So like gay characters over your straight characters.
But like that's an actual historical thing that happens, and it still happens today. You have plenty of media where creators are like, hey, the studio said no to it being gay, so we coded it as gay. One of the biggest examples I can think of, High School Musical. Because they wanted the two characters, ones who were in High School Musical 2 who swapped clothes, they wanted them to be gay. But
I am in Chad, right? No.
yeah,
I am in Chad, yes.
and the studio, Disney, said no, and there is a deleted scene they film where the two of them sit in each other's lap at graduation and just make the fuck out. Yeah, really deleted tape.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where can we find this tape?
Where can I find it?
That is a child's movie, please. So, we talked about building narratives and building the story at the table, but how do you build a safe table for your players to explore, to play, to see where they end up?
By being exclusionary. I remember there was this very, very wholesome and sweet trend going around on like the tabletop side of TikTok where everybody was like, everyone's welcome at my table, you're welcome at my table's so safe and awesome. And everybody was being so wholesome and sweet and it was very well intended. But I feel like it's very important to say that certain people have to be not allowed at your table. Because if people don't feel comfortable to explore, like I've sat at tables where some people gave me a vibe and maybe I had a good time and maybe I sat and played, but I probably didn't explore. I probably didn't go outside of my comfort zone. I probably didn't try anything too deep or too interesting, and I stayed in a box. So if you don't make some restrictions for who can be at your table, the people who are the most vulnerable at your table will not be able to be their full selves, and that will lead to them stunting their creativity, stunting their exploration, and not telling the story they actually want to tell. So be exclusionary. Pick out the bigot.
They're not invited at my table. But for me, it's just being open, being who I am, and just being like, hey, I'm here, you can talk to me, I too am in the game. So if there's anything you want to talk about or explore, let me know, we can work together, and yeah, let's make it gay, y'all. Let's get to it.
When I GM, I just make my world as inclusive as possible so that my players can feel like they can be who they want to be or explore the kinds of stories that they want to tell. Just being upfront about that during session 0, I'm queer, so if you want to be queer in this game, you are more than welcome to do that, but just being really explicit, like they were saying, to make a safe table, you have to not allow certain people at your table, and I want to say all are welcome, but Nazis, no, get out, fuck you.
Building off of that, it's really important to know what your players want. And that's why one of my favorite safety tools is lines, veils, and invitations. So, you know, but my favorite part of that safety tool is invitations. Please tell me what you want to see. Please tell me what you want to explore. What do you feel safe looking at? And when players want mess, give them mess and like show them, hey, I am listening to you. Because I'm gonna say it's easy to exclude things. It's easy to say, all right, this is a line, perfect, we're not even gonna talk about it. But showing your players that you are listening to what they want, like with stars and wishes, very, very great safety tool. Like, it shows you that you care about them and what they like to see. And let me tell you, one of the best ways to get somebody to open up to you is to show them, like, hey, I care about you. I care about your fun. I care about the things that you want to see. And building that bond, building that trust is so important at a table. Because that's where you can, that's when you can take stories and sort of push the envelope a little bit. Make you really feel something. Going back to our burn run conversation, my grandmother died during the finale of our actual play, a little bit before the finale of our actual play for Burn Bunch. And a lot of that last session was sort of me trying to reclaim my feelings about having lost someone that was really important. And part of that was too was the communication with RK was the GM. And RK was like, listen, we don't have to touch this stuff. And I was like, and I just like it, and it's really important for me to sort of almost have this like wave interaction. You know, but I also communicate with RK, I'm like, this is really heavy. We don't have to, like, from my side, we don't have to touch this at all. But because of the trust and respect that we had for each other, we were able to have a fantastic scene, you know, and like really just sort of push that storytelling aspect because there was that trust, that care, that safety at our table. Because I knew that I would be heard if I had to stop.
And it wasn't just us two, because there were other players at the table who consented into it and were okay with it. And there were a few terms that were used here that not everyone might know. So Vic, if you could define what stars and wishes are for everyone?
Oh yeah, so like at the end of the session, right? Everyone has like, I'm sure that everyone has that like spotlight moment, you know? And when you're playing with a table of people that you really enjoy, you know, you just sort of like admire. And at the end of the session, a star is a way to say, you know what? RK, I really liked this awful accent you did for this like stoned out fortune teller. So I just want to let you know that I really appreciated that part of the story. It really gave you some levity. Here's my star for you. And on the other hand, a wish is something that you express to your GM and your fellow players. Because, you know, the GM doesn't have to be the only driver of the story. You know, he just sort of lays out the landmark and you explore. But a wish is just like, hey, this is something I want to see in a future session. It can be something as immediate as next session. It can be something as far out as you want to see as a character arc. And that sort of thing, again, like sort of informs the table, like, hey, this is what I'm rooting for. This is what I'm shooting for. This is what I want to see. And again, it sort of that builds that trust and communication and bond between people.
Yeah, so I think I have two really big rules that I follow whenever I'm running games. The first being, if I have someone who is not of a certain minority group here, we're not going to touch oppression of that minority. So if I have a table that has one straight person there, we're not going to touch homophobia. If I have a table that has one cis person there, we're not going to touch transphobia. The characters who are gay and trans and all the lovely members of our community we have things that we deal with outside of that or whatever, but we're not going to touch that because I don't really trust the best acting ally the best ally out there. I do not trust them to properly handle a situation of trying to approach homophobia properly. Because there is growth that can happen there is healing that can happen when you approach that stuff correct, but you have to come correct.
It's like a sympathy versus empathy thing, right?
Yes.
Where like, yes, I've lived this experience, so like, and even myself as a queer person, any other queer person in here, I haven't lived their experience, but there are touchstones. There's stuff that we have felt that they can feel almost universal. But someone outside of that experience might not have that touchstone at all. And so it's stumbling against it at the table. It's rough, man. It throws off your whole vibe. And sometimes you don't even feel like you want to come back to it again. So like excluding that when there's those aspects, it can feel like, well, why don't you want to explore that with that person? It's just like, I don't have to.
I'm exploring it with my therapist, thank you. But yeah, so that's a big one, and then also, you know how the judicial system is supposed to work, where everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So I have this unspoken rule at all of my tables. I think I've said it literally once, and then it's just been like the cornerstone of me running games. All of the characters that I introduce are queer until proven straight. And that's as big as like saying, yes, this person has a partner, we're not going to specify what their pronouns are. Or if this person has a husband, this person has a wife. It also is as small as every time when I run the games that I run a lot of Urban Shadows, not sort of PvTO games that really rely on collaborative world building. Every time I have someone introduce an NPC, or we start talking about someone and we're like, oh, this connects with this person in the city that we've created. The first question I ask after I ask their name, what are their pronouns? I do not care if it is the most masculine sounding name on the planet. What are their pronouns? Because there are a lot of people who have masculine names that don't have to be pronouns. It's just how life is. And I think reflecting that in your TTRPGs is very important. So.
Let me ask you a positive question, though. More lighter question. What is your favorite moment like a queer moment at the table that you had previously? What is like that one moment that stands out to you? I will go first on this one for once. For me personally, you remember my GM, who was very straight. I got to play through a date with an NPC that my PC was dating. And we're in this post-apocalyptic, no one has any hope, everything's dying world. And our two characters just look up at the stars and say, maybe it's okay. Maybe it'll be okay and maybe we'll get through it. And they just pulled each other into the night. And it was just so soft and fragile in this world of torment and chaos. And it was just one of my favorite moments I've ever had in a game, especially as a player.
My favorite moment, my favorite prayer moment, and it was not mine. It was not my characters. It was watching one of my players' characters go through a moment, and I don't want to say too much because it's your character arc. but getting to without going into any sort of details, but it was my first experience as a GM having players who told me exactly like what kind of story they wanted and what they wanted to explore, and it was my first time really getting to handcraft that and allow that to happen. And then there was a point where I got to sit back and watch this character have their beautiful moment, and I had nothing to do with it, and I got to just watch it happen, and that was my favorite. So, sorry, that was incredibly vague.
But you're there to witness it, therefore it is your favorite. Yeah, it's all good. So I played in Huetopia, which is Huetopia streaming show. We did season 2 for Monster of the Week. And I played the design character, or it being decolonized, like in the setting. I was like an elemental character who was learning how to do motion and feelings and was in love with the mortals and beloved. Like at the finale where like she was giving up her ability to like walk amongst the humans, they had that moment. And it was beautiful. And now we did like epilogue and like the humans come down to visit with little air bubbles and like once a year she was able to go up to the surface and say hi and like see things. So like it's very gay. It's lovely.
A long distance relationship type feel. I just made a funny comment, but I also have an answer.
I'm still thinking, so.
Gotcha. Completely abandoned you, you just stared at me. My favorite moment actually came from the home game. I'm a big fan of Firebrands type games. If you guys don't know what those are, please look them up. They are fantastic. They're GMless games. And it's For the Honor, which is sort of like a She-Ra style, like Firebrands game. Meet me outside if you want to play today. I was playing a character who didn't have control of their life. And they were, sort of dealing with this is everything I've known, and everything I've known is this sort of violent act. And they were suddenly freed from it, and they had no fucking idea what to do. After spending a whole evening with someone showing them that violence didn't have to be their existence, that duty and honor meant nothing in the face of a desire to be gentle and kind. And then went free from that and just had this moment of like, oh, I can be any type of person. And sort of having those soft moments of soft intimacy with this other character who was a non-binary masked character with my masked character. And it's just, it almost feels like a queer, like I don't have to be in this heteronormative thing. I can explore my queerness, I can explore different avenues and systems. And like, I totally cried during it.
Yeah, so mine was also an home game. It was actually last week. We were playing Urban Shadows, which is my favorite game. My character, who is a tainted, for those of you who don't know what that means, my character has sold his soul to a demon. The first tainted that I ever played was a tainted who was trying to get out of his contract with the demon and just become a regular human. And I've decided to flip the script, and the tainted I'm currently playing is trying to become a human, and going through all the steps of that we've decided at the table, and doing a lot of terrible things, making a lot of deals with terrible people, and like just being an all-out terrible person, honestly. This character does not have a good bone in his body, and I don't want y'all to think otherwise. Anyway. So, the only character that my character is letting know whatsoever is his friends with benefits. His name is Namdi. And I think I had this moment with my character, which is the same moment that I end up having with a lot of like my realizing that I have feelings for someone. Like, I just smile at my phone when they text me shit. And like, my character just realizing I'm actually had a real love of this person that I've like tried really hard to like not let in. And I'm like doing a bunch of things that are probably going to like come back to bite me in the ass. And I want to make sure that this person is safe. And I want to make sure this person knows how I feel. So like literally just ask this person coffee. And people say I'm really good at like role playing these scenes, and it's just how I am because I do a great job of introducing something without actually telling you what I'm talking about. So everyone's concerned about what I'm about to say, as I'm doing right now. Anyway, so my character goes on this long ass spiel about just like, I know that I said that like, I didn't want this and like all this other stuff, and like this is really complicated, and I'm like doing a bunch of stuff, and now I'm just like, are you breaking up with me? And I'm like, literally the opposite. And like my character like confesses feelings, and it's just like I'm going through a lot, and I'm going to like be doing some things that are going to be very dangerous, and I don't want to do that without you knowing that I love you. And it's one of the most wholesome scenes that I've ever had as a teacher in a TTRPG, and just felt great.
Jay, do you have yours? I do have another one that if you would like more time.
I'm having a hard time thinking of things because I didn't think about this beforehand, and I can suddenly not remember literally any game I've ever played in ever. But I will say that I have not really had the chance to really explore romance in games, and that's something that I really want to do more of with the right table. Because, like I mentioned earlier, like my characters are just queer, but that's not something that I've really centered, like the focus of my games on. But I want to do more of that because I want some fluffy romance, and I want to do all the, like I said, I want to do all the things that straight people do, and like to have like those first date feelings, mutual pining, like all of those tropes that I love, enemies to lovers, like all of that. I want that, and hopefully I'll get to do that soon. Yeah, but I can't think of anything at the moment. Besides, I played in a game, home game, in college. Every single person in all the players, we were all playing lesbians. Our campaign name is We the Lesbians. and I can't believe I forgot about this. The whole goal of this game was to find a girlfriend. I can't believe I forgot about this. It's a great example. I played a really tall fire genasi wizard named Hassanye, and yeah, she ended up dating this really short gnome or halfling, I don't remember at this point, character, but yes, I did get a girlfriend in that game. I can't believe I forgot about that. That was like freshman year of college.
You just need a little gas in the tank to just power through.
I have one more moment from a game, which I don't think anyone here was there for it, but I was playing Masks, which if you haven't played Masks, it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game about superheroes, teen superheroes and everything. And one of my players was talking to their father, who was married to his husband of many years, and talking about how her dad used to be a hero, was secretly a hero in the past. And he's talking about his history and what he went through, and why he retired is because he got pregnant with his daughter. And my players were like, oh yay, trans dad. And my player went, RK, why would you introduce the Omegaverse? If you don't know what Omegaverse is, don't look it up.
Please save yourself.
What? That was Liz.
I don't know what that is.
I'll tell you after the panel. I'm not going to do it on mic.
It's fine. Okay, cool.
Bless lives over here.
So, I have one last question, and this is kind of more of a downer again. Have you ever had an experience with someone really bad at the table, or someone who is bigoted, as we said? How did you deal with it? How did you handle it?
So, for the first 10 years of my life, it's not that long, but maybe the first 5 years that I was playing games a lot, I played with a group of guys who were not great in a lot of ways. It was one of them I was in a relationship with. It was bad. I will not go into detail, but all of them were pretty rough. And during that time, because it was not a situation where I could just get up and go at that time in my life, and those games, despite being hell, were the most fun part of hell at that time. So I did still play at our weekly sessions, you know, even though it was not comfy for me. And I got through that time by doing a lot of joking, a lot of leaning into the tropes that made me uncomfortable so that I could take them over and feel like I was in control of those narratives. But ultimately, the only thing that fixed the problem was leaving. There was no amount of arguing with these people. There was no amount of explaining things to these people that would make them understand how problematic their behavior was. The only thing that got it to end was to just be done with them. And that is not always easy to do. It, as I said, took me about 5 years. It's worth it to do when you can.
Mine was recent. I was playing in a math game by someone who was brand new to running math. There's loads of other problems that happen with that game. But one of the things is they kept misgendering my character. I was like, and I stated specifically, they use they, them pronouns, please use them, and they went back to she, her. It was, the GM was this man, and then there were the Sims as players, and you know, I was just like, I sat with it, I dealt with it, and then as soon as it was over, I left. I slept on my feelings, messaged the GM the next day, like, this is the reasons why I'm mad at you, and you need to just let me know how to be better GM for next time. And then just blocked, moving on in my life. And because God took your boundaries down, and now I'm gonna start vetting better for GMs that I'm gonna be playing with. So vet the people, check with the GMs, if you know someone who's played that GM, to see how they play, and learn from my mistakes.
So I'm gonna cut off this question, there's gonna be 5 minutes left. And we do have a mic in the back right over there for Q&A. If people like to line up for Q&A, or have the enforcer, if you could walk around with the mic, that would be great. If you have questions for us, please let us know. Yeah, everyone's dead in line. Anyone have anything to say about that specific topic you want?
I have a running rule that a lot of my friends know about, but I will hurt your feelings before I leave if you decide to act a fool in front of me. And I just have been informed that I was a lot more timid when I started, and I found that got me really nowhere. And I just felt that, so I'm gonna feel a little bit good before I leave. So that's just what I do.
Questions?
Hi, my name is Logan. My pronouns are he and him. I am, after this, going to go back to the expo hall and spend more money than I'm supposed to spend. And one of the questions I always love to ask at panels like this is, I'd love to spend money on queer content by queer people, because, you know, we talk about, following on Instagram and Twitter, that's always wonderful, but like, give queer people money. It's always like really cool. Do you have any recommendations for how I should go spend my money upstairs?
Neither heaven nor hell. Is a fantastic. I literally thought of this moment after you asked me what my favorite queer moments. I played in a charity event with RK,
A bunch of other people.
yeah, a bunch of other people, and we played a queer polycule. We go over the ages. It's based off of Good Omens. It is fantastic. I really recommend it. DM was good.
It's called Neither Heaven Nor Hell by Tiana Shaw, the co-curator of the TTRPG Safety Toolkit.
Wait, that's nice. I didn't realize it was a strict analysis.
I have no idea about why
You can buy it on Itch if you don't, if it's not here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Victor. I use he, him pronouns. Right now, I am currently in the middle of running a game of Thirsty Sword Lesbians. That being said, I am ace, so I'm neither thirsty nor sword nor lesbian. And I feel like I need a little bit of help making fun queer romance. What advice do you guys have for making romance fun?
Enemies to lovers.
Enemies to lovers, I was gonna say. You got the sword, you can do the thing where the other person puts the sword under the chin and lifts it, like, oh, big sexy.
I just also want to add, we've talked about this a lot. Talk to those players. Ask them what's fun for them. Like, what kind of romance is fun would be a fun story for you to tell. And then you just get to go off of what they tell you.
I just realized that we'll be playing and some of my players will be flirting with an NPC and I'm like, oh, it's fine.
Listen, the shy flirting back can also be fun. The one who's really nervous and is like, I like you too, but also, don't look at me. Like, you can have lots of fun. There's lots of different types of flirting. Like I said, ask your players what they think. We'll lightning round the last question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. Hello. So, I play with a lot of straight people and stuff, and whenever me and the GM or me and like the one other really excited to play romance kind of character pops up, like the rest of the table gets real giggly. So I was wondering if you have any tips to how to get the players more comfortable. Like it always they're not like negative about it, they just get giggly. So how do you make it more of an accessible thing, I guess?
Introducing other people to more queer content is really, like, if you get more people to watch more queer content, and it becomes more normal for them. It becomes less of like a giggly, this is weird, and more like that makes me feel like I felt during this scene when we were watching this thing together or reading this thing. Like, just expanding their vision makes things easier.
And give people extra experience points for remembering scenes that they liked. They will pay attention more and not laugh during the scenes.
In addition, one other thing, if you are the GM, connect those NPCs or PCs to other players' backstories, then they have to care. That one tidbit of info about the connecting backstories solves the mystery. But that's
Thank you for your question.
yeah, thank you for your question.
All you guys.
Let's go the other way. Dillin.
Hi, I'm Dillin. I use he and she pronouns. You can find me at Super Dillin everywhere on the internet.
Hi, I'm Mo, they, she pronouns. I am everywhere on the internet at Second Basis.
Hello everyone, I am Nala or Jay, go by either. I use they, them pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at Nalalu and at naladraws if you want to see my artwork. And I am at naladraws anywhere else I have social media.
Hi, I'm Victor. I use he and they pronouns, and you can find me on anything really where to buy my stuff or to hire me if you like at Dillin Vicencio.
Howdy, hi, and I'm Eli. I use he and they pronouns, and you can find me on Twitter and all the other stuff at Reliable Elliot, where I talk about the shows I'm on and the things that I'm doing.
And I am RK Wilde, use they, them pronouns. You can find me online at Russ Wildest and he gay and do crimes. Have a good day.